Jarrah, the situation where a number of houses that belong to Jewish people that are living there, a number of Arab houses that are living there. They're in fact not just neighborhood, opposite neighborhood, but we're talking about house to house, door to door. And we saw disturbances are up there with also pro-Palestinian and left-wing groups there to stir up the tensions. And once again there, our police officers had to respond and deal with more significant violence that took place between the two sides. And then we saw on Monday, on the Jerusalem Celebrations Day, where the Israeli police had made significant security measures and preparations ahead of time, specifically for the Jerusalem Day. There were two issues that took place on that day where the Israeli police made decisions which are important, security-related decisions to try and make sure that the Israeli Arab communities would not continue and set off a full-scale riot. Number one, we made sure that the Temple Mount, which is a decision which is not normally made, but in previous years, Jewish people would go on the Temple Mount and visit the Temple Mount. And that's what would take place regularly. This year it was decided by the head commander of Jerusalem because of the indications and intelligence that we had received of the possibility of a full-scale incident, riots by Israeli Arabs and Palestinians on the Temple Mount. We decided that the Temple Mount would be closed to visitors in general. That was significant, that was important, and that was taken in order to try and prevent disturbances from taking place, so that would not be used as an excuse to set off violent confrontations. Second of all, the Jerusalem parade and march, which normally takes place every year from the center of town in Jerusalem, makes its way through Jaffa Gate and then through the Damascus Gate area. We decided that it would be too dangerous for people to celebrate and dance through the area and make their way to the Western Wall from Damascus Gate, which is also considered to be one of the flashpoints in Jerusalem. And that decision was a correct decision. But unfortunately, despite those two changes in the strategic decisions, Israeli Arabs took to the streets, were involved in full-scale riots against police officers, both on the Temple Mount, both at Damascus Gate, and our units once again responded to those incidents. In the afternoon of the Jerusalem Day celebrations, Hamas decided, they took the initiative and they decided to open a new confrontation by firing rockets into Jerusalem. There were thousands of people on the streets that were celebrating. They had to take cover and the sirens went off in Jerusalem. It's the first time that this has happened for years. Immediately after that, and what we saw since, in fact, Monday, we saw rockets, hundreds of rockets that have been fired from the Gaza Strip, as Jonathan mentioned, inside the heart of Israel. Those rockets focusing on the Israeli Jewish population in populated cities such as Ashkelon, Ashdod, and further into the heart of Israel towards Tel Aviv. The first responders at the scene are our bomb disposal experts. They arrive in the area. I can confirm and tell you that the rockets that we have seen that have been fired into the area of Sderot, which is just 1.5 miles outside the Gaza Strip area, and then afterwards the rockets that were being fired inside Ashkelon and Ashdod, this time we're seeing much larger rockets that are reaching far deeper into the heart of Israel. And not just 1 million Israelis under the threat, but more close to 3.5 to 4 million Israelis now in the range of those rockets. I can also confirm that the scale and size of the warheads on the rockets, and I'm sure you've all seen that recently in the pictures that I've put out and the pictures that we've put out about the scenes and the devastation that is being caused. We're talking about close to 30 to 40 kilos of explosives on the larger warheads. And you can imagine how dangerous that is for someone who does not manage to get into a safe zone and a safe area on time. Anybody who is outside is exposed and will be killed. And that is why we are continuing to message out to the public to go into those safe zones and safe areas, whether it's 15 to 30 seconds close to the Gaza Strip, whether it's 45 towards the area of Beersheba, or whether it's approximately just less than 2 minutes on impact in the areas of Tel Aviv, even possibly further north, or Jerusalem as well. So we're calling upon the public to listen carefully to the laws, to the orders, to the directions about safety zones and safe areas. In terms of numbers and statistics, what I can confirm and what we know of until now, 10 Israelis have been killed directly as a result of those rockets. 6 people have been injured seriously, 11 have been injured moderately, and 84 have been taken to hospital in light condition. There's been several hundred others that have been taken to hospital that have been treated for shock, but those are the numbers in terms of the physical injuries that have been people have received until now. Apart from that, the Israeli National Police, at the same time when we're dealing with the rocket strikes and we've switched from regular police patrol mode to emergency mode, the same officers, and responding to those rockets, we are dealing now with the violence and the disturbances and the riots that have taken place within inside the Israeli Arab community from the north of Israel, from Akko, all the way down until the southern part of Israel. And if we talk about geographically, we're talking about from Akko down to the Wadi Ara area, which is in the northern part of Israel within the different communities, to the heart of the problems that we've had to deal with in Lod, the city of Lod, and in the area down south of Be'er Sheva, and in the Bedouin community down near Rahat. We know that there's been thousands of incidents that have taken place. Our police officers are confronting and responding to roads that are blocked, petrol bombs that are being thrown at our officers, vehicles that have been burnt, Israelis that are being attacked, with the most significant issues that have taken place have been in the city of Lod. And if you're asking yourself why specifically in the city of Lod, the reason being Lod and Akko, the reason being is because people are living not just neighborhood to neighborhood, but people are living house to house, door to door. If you have one apartment building, you can have 4 apartments that are owned by Jewish families and 4 apartments that are owned by Israeli Arab families. So the police deployment is very wide scale, very focused to try and be at the right place at the right time and prevent people from being injured. We've seen several times across the areas within inside Lod, for example, within inside Ramle, within inside Sakhnin, where live ammunition has been used. Israeli Arabs have taken weapons and opened fire both at officers as well as at local Israeli and Jewish families. There were 2 significant incidents that took place, which was seen on social media. Number one is when a Jewish mob tried to retaliate and take to the streets of what was taking place. That took place in Bat Yam. And we have made 6 arrests of that mob who were involved in beating an Israeli Arab man. Obviously, the pictures on social media look a lot worse, but he was beaten moderately and taken to hospital. And we've also made 2 arrests of suspects who were involved in the beating of a Jewish man in Akko, when he was beaten with iron bars and with rocks. Altogether, we've made 890 arrests until now over the past week, and we've had 265 police officers that have been injured, either moderately or lightly, and taken to hospital after being attacked or confronted with petrol bombs, with stones, with rocks, or even attempted ramming attacks as well. What took place specifically to today is that we dealt with the Nakba Day. We're still deployed, our border police units are still deployed in and around the West Bank specifically. This is a different area, different region as to what I was talking about. And we're dealing right now with disturbances that are taking place near Bethlehem, near Hebron, near Kalkilia, near Nablus. It's been relatively quiet in comparison to yesterday. But no doubt police activities will continue throughout the evening and possibly through the night until the next hours ahead of us. In terms of where we're heading to and looking ahead to the internal issues that have been happening until now, we of course are going to continue to respond to any rockets that land, whenever they land, if they land, and give a rapid response in order to support the communities and help prevent people from being injured and killed. We're working closely together and coordinating with the MDA, Magen David Adom, as we normally do in emergency situations. And in terms of the police activities on the ground dealing with the internal problems, we have 15,000 extra police officers that are mobilized across the country from north to south. Just to understand the figures and numbers altogether in the Israeli National Police, there are 30,000 police officers altogether. This is an extra draft of officers that are on the streets. So we're using all necessary power, logistics, and tactical units in order to deal and prevent with the disturbances. And if necessary, we can add further units depending on the level of violence that is taking place. And the most important emphasis is that our police units are responding only to the level of violence that is taking place on the street. If things will calm down over the next few days, which we are no doubt hoping for, then as far as we're concerned, we will reduce the number of officers. They'll be less visible, you won't see them. If necessary, we can take our units back to the headquarters and the different border police tactical headquarters. But at the moment, the majority of our units are out on the streets in order to protect, in order to prevent, and in order to make arrests. We're also working closely with the ISA, the Shabak, in order to use intelligence and find those people that have used weapons, those potential suspects that can use weapons. And the Israeli National Police at the headquarters are also tracking closely social media in order to see individuals who are putting out incitement, calling upon people to attack Israelis or to attack Arabs. That is something that we're dealing with at the moment in terms of our desks, gathering intelligence, gathering information, both in terms of human resources, as well as on social media as well. Leo?
Okay, Mickey, thank you so much. And I see there are a few hands already there. Then I'll start with Zlatko.
It's all right. We're seeing protests around the world. I would openly say that are protests in support of Hamas terrorism. For example, in North Macedonia, in my country, tomorrow is a protest which is organized by the radical left, but supported by radical Islamist groups. My question is, do you think that this is orchestrated by some of the powers like Turkey, for example?
Well, I don't know if Turkey is in charge, and it's very disturbing that the radical left, as you call them, support an Islamic fundamentalistic terror organization like Hamas. It brings me to the thought that it's not really supporting Hamas, it's more an anti-Israeli demonstration. And we've seen those in different places around Europe, the far left and the far right. Their points of contact is a lot of the times is the anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. We do see a lot of support for Israel in Europe, in the United States. There are rallies supporting Israel's right to defend its citizens, condemning terrorism. And we also see rallies in the other directions. A lot of the times those rallies are organized by groups that are not really pro-Palestinians. They are more of an anti-Israeli groups because a real pro-Palestinian will never support Hamas. No one wants the Palestinian Authority to be ruled by the terrorists of Hamas. If you ask the people of Gaza, they would definitely say they are not really happy with the way Hamas is ruling them. So that's my conclusion to that. Bogdan.
Yeah, thank you very much. My first question would go to Lior.
Yes, please.
Do you have any updates for us regarding the diplomatic efforts, ongoing diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation? We've been informed about Egyptian, US, and other countries sending envoys on both sides to obtain this de-escalation as soon as possible. And second question would be a combination of military and police. Do you have any kind of indication telling us about the coordinated efforts on internal and external dimension of this rioting all across Israel? I mean, do you see a coordination between what's happening in the Gaza Strip and what's happening in the cities, in the major cities that you have already displayed to us?
So I'll answer the first questions. I can't refer to the Egyptians' effort. I'm not aware of them. I do know there is an American envoy in Israel or American official in Israel. As we stated before, both Jonathan and myself, this is not the time for a ceasefire, not while Israelis are still under terror attacks. And actually, as we spoke, there was a terror attack, or the Hamas launched the missile from the Gaza Strip on Israeli citizens. And we think that the end of this conflict should put us in a situation with Hamas understanding that they cannot and should not do that again. Regarding the second question, since Jonathan is not here, I'll ask Mickey if Mickey wants to answer that.
Yes, absolutely. What we understand and what we see, the surge of violence that is taking place is from the Israeli Arab community, not from Hamas activists. I have to emphasize that the Israeli Arab community is part of our society, part of both the Israeli National Police, for example. We have hundreds of police officers that are Muslims that serve together with us. They serve the communities. They speak Arabic in order to bridge the gaps. This is something that we've been focusing on for years, in fact. And therefore, what is happening today within the Israeli Arab society, I think, and we understand that they are causing a tremendous amount of damage to themselves. There is no reason in the world for them to get involved in huge violent issues and riots across the country. They are causing damage to themselves. We're certainly not seeing Hamas activities taking place inside the cities themselves. We do know that once in a while, there might be some extremists in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank that might try and make contact with those Israeli Arab communities, more or less on a criminal level. But there hasn't been any major terrorist attacks by the Hamas from within inside the Israeli Arab communities. The terrorist attacks that we have to deal with, and that's what Leo mentioned, and we've dealt with that over the last 24, 48 hours when we've seen a number of attacks, are coming out from the West Bank, from the Bethlehem area, from Hebron, from terrorists from there, who want to show and put their foot down and say that they are affiliated and connected, and they want to show their support from what is going on at the moment in the Gaza Strip. So we have to differentiate between the Gaza Strip and what is happening, and the Hamas, who are firing at innocent civilians and Israelis across Israel up to Tel Aviv. What is happening and what we're dealing with in the West Bank, which are the Palestinian areas, and the constant threat that there is of terrorist attacks, which we're preventing and stopping. And the Israeli Arab local communities, where they've become very active and very involved in full-scale riots and disturbances, attempting to attack police officers and attack innocent Jewish families, women and children, and people that are on the streets.
Thank you, Mickey. And there was a question from Lucian earlier, and he couldn't ask. Can you ask now, Lucian?
Yes, good evening.
Okay. Good evening.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My question is, how vulnerable are the Abraham Accords, taking into account the current situation on the Israeli-Palestinian front? Did you have mutual talks on this issue? Thank you.
Thank you. This is definitely a new situation for Israel in that scenario, the new Middle East and the Abraham Accords and the normalization process that we have also with Morocco. And so far, I think that we are there is no real effect on the new relationships that we have with the Gulf countries and Morocco, and hopefully it will not be damaged. And we hope they understand that Israel was under attack, and Israel has a right to defend itself. And it's a very clear message that we're saying to them as well. Adolfo, por favor.
Thank you, spokesperson. Good evening, good afternoon from Lima. My question is for you about this Sunday session of the United Nations Security Council. What do you expect from this meeting? Have they coordinated with the United States government?
We are very coordinated with the United States government. They are our closest allies, and we have dialogues in different levels. As you may have heard, there was a talk between President Biden and the Prime Minister Netanyahu not long ago, when we are talking to other levels within the White House and in the State Department. What we expect the international community to understand what the real situation is. But expectations are one thing and reality is another. The UN is not really a place when Israel can really be treated fairly, and we expect at least that it will be balanced, and will those two measures, those two statements that I talked about, the condemning of the terror attacks on Israeli society and recognizing Israel's right to self-defense and defend its citizens, will be heard there. And there are a lot of things that Israel will say regarding the terror attacks on Israeli civilians and the ways that Israel is dealing with the terrorists in the Gaza Strip. Jonathan, you have another question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I just wanted to revisit what you mentioned was the Israeli Arab local community unrest in particular. And you mentioned that there's a monitoring of social media, for example, from desk work in relation to that. I'm just curious if there's anything more you can tell us in terms of those internal problems, about the infrastructure and organization behind that. Is it truly totally spontaneous? Are there cells organizing it of some sort? What is behind it? Are there organizations funding it? Is there anything more you can tell us about that?
Okay, I think that's your area.
Yeah, sure. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. I mean, in terms of the tracking, first of all, we are making sure that we're tracking social media, open information when people are calling upon individuals to get together and arrive at a certain junction and attack police officers. And they talk openly on social media about getting together, using petrol bombs and planning. That is something that we're immediately onto. And based on that, we turn up at the houses and we turn up at people's areas where they are in order to make arrests. That is absolutely necessary prior to a full-scale incident that can happen. And we know that those are the people who are inciting, instigating, and preparing those confrontations across the different Israeli Arab societies. That is something that we're dealing with very openly. Apart from that, of course, we have intelligence work that comes in from individuals who live within the communities, like any police force across the world. And we try and understand who is involved, who is setting up, who is planning, etc. and etc. Apart from that, we're also speaking openly to the leaders of the Israeli Arab communities and the Knesset members, the parliament members, and we've asked and called upon them to be more active. The mayor of the different cities, okay, for example, Sakhnin in the north, we speak to him and we tell him, calm the situation down. Make sure the residents don't take the law into their own hands. We don't want a full-scale riot in the evening. We're asking them to have their impact and their influence as well as to what is happening in general within the community before the tactical use of police officers on the scene. We're also turning to the, as I said, to the members of the Knesset, and we're asking them to be closely in contact and influence as many people as possible. And I'm talking about the leaders of the communities, those that are active in the communities, those who basically give the orders. When they give the orders and they say, don't go on the streets, they can, we understand that they can take off at least 50% of the numbers of people that are not going to go on the streets or who are going to go on the streets. So if we can have, instead of having 5,000 people confronting us, okay, and we'll only have half that number, that is something that we need to do in order to support the communities and try and break down the problems that could exist before they actually take place on the ground.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move to Armin. I hope I pronounced your name right.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. My question was for Mickey Rosenfeld about the Arab Israeli community. I was actually a few days ago in Lod talking to the Arab communities, and they were telling me, of course, that was their testimony, but they were telling me that what they were feeling is that the police was not protecting them against some Jewish mobs, especially the one coming from settlers in, or at least Jewish people in Judea and Samaria. And that's a very common thing I heard in the mouth of many people that was saying that our problem is that we have to protect ourselves because the police is not doing its job by protecting us. So I wanted to have your answer to this very common thing that's at least I heard in Lod.
Well, I think that's very unfortunate that that's what they were telling you, because unfortunately it's not the reality. I will go through stage by stage what has happened on the ground, specifically in Lod. What happened in Lod is that Arab residents took to the streets and attacked a lot of Jewish families, burnt doors, opened fire. We had 3 people that were shot inside the city of Lod. Our police officers were deployed, responded. We had many police vehicles also burnt, as well as civilian vehicles that were also burnt. And that's why we moved into the area tactically, a lot of different border police units to deal with those disturbances. We also implemented a curfew. And why was that? Because we realized, and we wanted to prevent anyone who does not live in the area whatsoever from coming in. And I'm referring to people who live in Jerusalem, or people who live in Netanya, or anyone who is someone who is involved in any illegal activity. We don't want these small groups coming in because they're bored, and then they're going to start retaliating against Arabs as well. So once again, we made sure that we separated what was going on as much as possible to bring in the Jewish communities, as you call them, from the West Bank. You call them settlers. The settlers have not come into Lod. Lod is on a curfew from 8 o'clock every evening until 3 o'clock in the morning, and nobody is allowed to come in and out of Lod from 5 o'clock in the afternoon if you're not a resident of Lod. So today, for example, the situation on the ground was much calmer, much quieter. Of course, we have the night ahead of us, but the situation is under control. There are no mobs and gangs that have infiltrated inside those cities as of now. And I'm talking about Ramle, Lod, and Akko, because those have been the main areas which we've had to focus on. But I wouldn't bring the Jewish settlers, as you call them, into the equation here. They're not part of the equation. And that is why before I said and tried to differentiate what is going on between the Gaza Strip area, Judea and Samaria, West Bank, and the Israeli Arab communities. We are hoping that the situation will calm down gradually. The longer it goes on, we know and we understand the more damage that they are causing to themselves and causing to the relationship that is an ongoing relationship that has been built up for decades already with the Jewish communities. That is why today the facts are, how is it that a Jewish family is living in the same apartment building as a Muslim family? Because the relationship and the understanding on the ground until now has been quiet, has been together, has been blended in together. It's been a lot of understanding, but once the situation got out of control, once the vehicles were burnt, once the synagogues were set alight, that is something that we cannot let happen in a normal society, in any type of society across Israel.
Okay, thank you, Mickey. And we have time for one more question, and we'll turn it to Albert. Albert?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Just
okay, thank you. Good evening from Tirana. First of all, let me express my condolences.
You'll have to talk louder. Sorry.
Now it's okay now?
Yes, now it's better.
Because of the line. Good evening from Tirana, Albania. First of all, let me express my condolences to the Israeli families whom they lost their family members because of the terrorist attacks. And And secondly, I have a question. It is still on the table, the plan for a military incursion in Gaza Strip?
I didn't hear the question. Nikki, did you hear the question?
I think it is about invasion in Gaza or incursion.
The plan, yes, for military incursion in
Okay,
Gaza.
I'll answer that. Thank you, Bogdan, for translating to us. And I'll say that the Israeli government, the cabinet, ordered the Israeli army, the IDF, to be prepared for all possibilities. That includes all possibilities. Our goals in this operation is to stop the rocket launching on Israeli citizens and to attack the terror infrastructure of Hamas within the Gaza Strip. We will do anything possible in order to get to this objective. Within that, I would like to thank you all for staying with us for an hour and a half now and for joining us. I want to thank Mickey Rosenfeld for his time and his briefing, and also Jonathan Conricus for his briefing before. We understand that it's very important for you to get the information in person, and it's very important for us to have this dialogue with all of you. Thank you all for joining. We will hopefully do the next one shortly, maybe after the conflict will be over, just to wrap it up. And if not, we will do another one in just a few days. Anyways, thank you. Keep safe, and we will see each other soon. If you need a recording of this session, please contact the embassy or consulate that invited you. We will send it. I think it will be tomorrow morning Israel time. That's it from us. Goodbye from Jerusalem, and good night to all.
Thank you.
Good.